Diego, would you like to kick this? I know you have a particular interest around the spend entrepreneur and what the characteristics of that spend entrepreneur might be, and how those of us who are procurement leaders could become spend entrepreneurs. So you might want to fold that into the notion of how we can help one another more effectively as a professional group. So you kick it off, if you will, Diego, and then I'd like quite quickly to pass to Sue.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, at this point of the day, it's probably also not so easy to cover a topic like this, because I think it has been covered at length in the previous discussion, especially about how we need to upscale the professionalization of this role. The thought that I have that was also partially covered by David in his presentation is that there are eventually two elements of it. The first is that it takes guts. It takes a lot of guts to actually enable resources to act professionally. It's major corporations are easily confined into the boundaries of how they work. And I was talking recently also to a procurement professional, a senior member of the procurement team of a media company, who was explaining to me how he could equally not address certain areas, certain opportunities that we had identified, because this was not part of his area of expertise and his area of mandate from the organization. And that's a little bit the problem, right? When you are an employee with a mandate and a job description, that's what you do. When you become an entrepreneur and you're running your own company, that's not an excuse anymore. You can't afford to do that, yeah? And and therefore you need to reinvent yourself. You need to find the resources to basically become an expert of what you want to pursue, and then go after that. Now, collaboration is often, to your point, Jules, also earlier, a very good way of doing this. Let's think an example of all areas where you typically don't have the expertise because you're simply not big enough, because you're buying something which is purchased so seldom, like a good that is purchased every second year in your organization, that you're not possibly able to basically retain the capabilities in-house. Nobody will stay with you rolling their thumbs for a year just waiting for that specific exercise to be done, or anything like this. That is where, in example, collaboration can start. And that's where I personally am seeing, and that's something I'm personally often involved with, a lot of factual collaboration that goes even beyond the simply exchanging best practices, that goes to sharing talent. Procurement alliances, procurement consortia, all elements that basically drive the ability to leverage all the economies of skills that exist in this particular arena, right? And it's even more than simply pulling together volumes, which is very difficult for different companies. They have different specifications. Often it doesn't really work like that, yeah? But simply being able to rely on the best procurement professionals for the job naturally professionalize, rather than picking a random person who has time for that specific task, to actually naturally professionalize the thing.
Very nice. Sue, issues around collaboration, professionalization, linking up, connecting. What's your thought?
I'd like to stick with the professional certification, just to put my thoughts there, and then we can go to the others. We definitely need a certification. A couple reasons, they've already been stated, but just to kind of reiterate. One is we have a lot of people entering our profession that have no official formal training. And I think having a certification would accelerate their careers and give them an opportunity to advance in the procurement / supply chain profession. Second, I think it's going to give our customers more respect for what we do and give us more credibility. We talked about trust and building trust. We need to have credibility to build trust and respect, and I think having a certification that everybody can buy into is going to be important. And the third thing has to do with ethics and probity. I just recently went through a complete wall-to-wall ABC compliance audit at Jacobs, where I work. We have 60,000 employees globally in 300 different offices, and we have over $8 billion a year in spend. So it was quite a comprehensive study. And when we started out, we knew, you talk about the tribe, our tribe was about 1,600 people out of the 60,000. But when we went to each regional area, each community, if you will, each market, and said, please give us the names of the people that issue agreements, contracts, buy products, services, the number ballooned to 7,000. So there were 7,000 people doing, I guess, transactions, if you will, that should have been controlled and overseen by a procurement function, and yet we only had identified and tagged 1,600. So when we went through and did the e-learning and all the due diligence we had to do for anti-corruption, anti-bribery, it turned out that it was a much bigger sample, and it also told us that we had a lot more risk. So that's a third reason, I think, is to ensure that we as procurement professionals provide that kind of ethics boundaries, if you will, for our companies. So I'm all for it, so I'll help you promote it in the U.S.
Can I challenge David around the professionalisation? I mean, a profession can go in one of two ways, can't it? I think it was George Bernard Shaw who defined a profession as a conspiracy against the laity. Okay, so it can be a way of sealing yourself off from real care and responsibility for others. Mm-hmm. And the other way is David Mason's definition of a profession, which is a sincere desire to help others, which goes back to the, if you like, the egoless view of life. Now, how do you ensure that the profession goes in the good way as opposed to the conspiratorial way?
There's no guarantees. I think it's what's driving us is the ethical side, and it was touched on earlier today. I mean, that's the area that I think we have to show that we're whiter than white and better than better. Yeah. Because we're not seen that way at the moment. I got very annoyed at the Panorama programme, some of you might have seen, which used words like buyers are animals that some of you may have seen on Tesco. And I went public on that because that's the problem with a profession that doesn't actually stand up. The other reason we're doing it, and I think we have to be, as a charitable body, a charity, we have to be and stand by our ethics. That's we're nothing. And our brands, if our brand goes, as Liz will say, we are nothing. So we have to preserve our brand at all costs and do the right thing rather than the expeditious thing or the easy thing. So, there's a lot of quite a few senior members who've rung me in anger when they failed our exams, saying, how dare you? But I said, sorry, our standards are our standards. They will not change for anyone. I think the other point is, there's a couple of things I didn't have time to make, is it's about accountability for your actions. And it's saying that there is a consequence for doing something that you know is wrong, but for instance, it's cheap and economical. Because I'm going to please my boss because I'm going to get the cheapest sauce, and I don't care what's going on down there. I really don't. I've got my bonus, I'm happy, and he's happy. But what we're saying is, actually, if you have a professional license, you can lose it. There is consequences, and we will take it away if you're found to have been engaged with a supplier that's committing corruption or actively doing the wrong things. So I think there's a huge social agenda there that is with a consequence that comes with it. But it also, as I said earlier, it protects us by saying to whoever's making us do this, and one of the hardest things I get is some of our African members saying to me, I don't know what to do, my boss has told me to use this supplier, I know they're corrupt, they're his brother's favourite source, what do I do? And I say, well, we can't name and shame the corporate, that's beyond our remit, but what we can do is give you, you've told us, so you've whistleblowed your license, you've saved your license, and you can tell your boss, I'll do what you tell me, but you're putting my professional license at risk. I cannot, if I lose that license, I cannot work elsewhere. That's happening now in a number of African countries who've taken this on board and said, you have to have that license, and if you don't, you're not in government procurement in our country. So it's starting to happen slowly. And that was the reason that the White House contacted us, through Sam Walsh, which was great, saying, we're interested in this because it's tangible, it's relatively straightforward, and it'll fight corruption by bringing accountability to those at the coalface making the decisions, rather than pledges and nice to-dos that actually are just pledges and nice to-dos. So I think there's that piece to it. The final piece, I'd say, whether we like it or not, and it was touched on this morning, we actually are facing the first bit of regulation on our profession in this country ever, and that's the slavery bill, which has within it the fact that any business leader is going to be accountable for their supply chain in slavery. That's illegal. That's going to be illegal. I don't know the size of it yet in terms of size of company. That's still being debated. We're in consultation with the government on it. But that's coming like a train down at us as a profession, where if I'm a chief exec, I'm going to be looking at my supply department saying, hang on a minute, I could be in big trouble here. Big trouble. You better sort me out. You better protect me. Yeah. So I think some of it's actually not nice to do anymore. It's good. And the last thing I'll say on this is we've called for self-regulation because we're not a regulatory body. But it's starting to, there is instances it's becoming regulatory already. We're asking self-regulation. We'd far rather companies say, you know what, why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we have our best people in procurement at a standard of competence and behaviour that we know is comparable with the industry that we work within, or the public and private sector?
Tania, what's your turn on this?
I'm not sure. I'm a huge supporter, obviously, of accreditation and certification. I think that's the backbone of any profession. I think we are a profession, but I guess I'm more of the founder of the CPO Charm School, and I think our greatest strides are going to be made when we get the best leaders at the top of the business. And what I really got excited about today, and I think my husband actually has said it, was, when we're sitting around and he looks, there's just a sea of faces. I want the people in this room to be the ones who've got the best ideas. And I think that's what we really need to inspire. And I think, Dapu and Sue, they're new to procurement and they've been recruited as CPOs because they're really good business people. And I think we have a lot of really smart commercial people in our profession who really deserve to be at the top of the tree and have a seat at the table. And that's what we've got to keep focused on. If we have great leaders, we're connected, we're using our commercial skills, the rest will follow. And we make sure everyone's trained and certified. But then there's no limitations on what we can contribute. Because we're adding value, and I think we've got all those skills. Something the finance profession often talks about is, you can be the best financial controller in the world, but that doesn't mean you can make a great CFO. And I think that's the big step is, okay, you could be the best, senior director of category management or vendor management, but to be a C-level executive, you've got to be able to think externally, you've got to be able to communicate, you've got to build relationships. And those are a lot of the themes we have today. And I think, that's probably what we're missing in the profession at the moment is how do we have this CPO charm school, or how do we attract the best commercial leaders into the profession and keep them there, and then we'll attract the best people. That's totally off topic, isn't it? But that's just what I wanted to share.